In this video, we're going to build a mock-up of a video game database app using Navigator 2.0 and Provider 6. Hello, so if you're new here, my name is Tommy. I put out Flutter videos every week, and they're usually catered more towards beginners. This week, we're going to build a video game database. It's going to have 4 screens. It's going to have a game list. When you click on the game, it's going to show the game details. We're going to have a settings screen and an about screen. So this video isn't too advanced, but I do have a couple of introductory videos for navigation and for provider. I'll include those in the description as well as link those at the appropriate moments. So the first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and create our screens. I'm going to create a folder called Screens. And in there, I'm going to create 4 files, one called List, one called Details, one called Settings, and one called About. So now we're going to create a bottom navigation bar component. It's going to be imported in all of these screens except for the details screen. I'm going to create a folder called Components. And I'm going to create a file I'm just going to name bottom nav. Inside this file, we will import material. We'll create a stateless widget by typing in STLESS. So immediately inside here, we're going to create our bottom navigation bar. So in this bottom navigation bar, we're going to have 3 items. We're going to have a home button that will go to the list page. We'll have a settings button that will go to the settings page, and about button that will go to the about page. So we'll create the home button first. We'll put const up here to remove the warnings. Now I create the settings button and the about button. So now we're going to go back to our list page and build that out. Once again, I'm going to import material, and then I'm going to import the bottom nav component. Now I'll create another stateless widget, and I'll call it list screen. We'll put a scaffold in here and an app bar. And then we'll go ahead and add that bottom navigation bar and tie it to the bottom nav. So now let's get main.dart so we can add list to it. We'll create a stateless widget called nav app. Change that up here. Now we need to import the list screen up here. We'll do a material app right here. So we will run that. Okay, as you see, it says video game list at the top, and then we have our bottom navigation bar. It has the home button, the settings button, and the about button. So now let's copy the contents of list and paste it into settings. I will change this to settings. We will do the same thing with about. And then we will paste it into details and change details as well, but we're going to remove the bottom nav references. Now that we have all the basics of our screens created, we're going to create one more file in the screens folder. I'm going to create a file called all.dart, all.dart. And in here, I'm going to type export list.dart. And then I'm going to do that for details, settings, and about as well. Now we're going to go back over to main, and instead of having list in here, we're going to do all. And what that allows us to do is we can import all the screens at once instead of having to import them individually. We can go ahead and restart it, and everything still looks good. So now let's go ahead and add the Navigator widget right here into Material app. So Navigator is implemented now, but you'll notice that we still can't change to the separate screens. We're going to use Provider for that. So let's go ahead and get Provider installed. We'll open up our terminal and we'll type in Flutter pub add provider. If it worked correctly, you should be able to go to your pubspec YAML file and you'll see it right there. So now we're going to create a controller for navigation. First thing we'll do is create a folder called controllers. And then we'll create a file called navigation. Inside this navigation file, we're going to import material. And now we're going to create a navigation controller that extends the ChangeNotifier. At the top, we'll create a string called screen name. And then we'll create a function called changeScreen that we will use to change the screen name. So changeScreen will be called, and then we'll take the screen name that we give it and set it to the screen name up here. And then we'll notify the listeners. So now we're going to go back to main and set up our listener providers. The listener providers will communicate with the rest of the app, and we're going to use a multi-provider because we plan on having multiple providers. So let's go ahead and set up the first one for the navigation controller. First, we need to import provider up here at the top, and then we'll also import our navigation controller. Now inside Run App, we'll set up our multi-provider. Move this inside here like this, and that should be good to go now. Now we're going to go back into bottom nav and set it to change the screen when one of these buttons is tapped. We'll first import provider and the navigation controller. We're going to create a variable right here called navigation that's going to listen to the navigation controller. And you'll notice we put listen false here because we're not wanting to listen. We're just wanting to change the screen from here. So now under the bottom navigation bar here, I'm going to type on tap. So right here, what we're going to do is what's called a switch case. And what a switch case is more or less a simplified if then else statement. So I'll type it out and then I'll explain it just a little bit further. So as you see here, if the index is 0, which means you press this home button here, it's going to change the screen name to /, which we're using to identify the home page, or in this case, the list page. If you press the second button, which has an index of 1, it's going to change the screen to /settings. And if you press this button for an index of 2, it's going to change the screen to /about. Now you can use anything you want here. You could use Mo and Larry and Curly. You can honestly simplify this a lot and just do something like navigation, change screen, button index. And then you'll just want to use an integer inside the navigation controller where we're using a string. But I happen to like it this way because to me it makes just a little bit more sense and I like the visual of where it's going. So back in main.dart now, we're going to go down here to the widget build and we're going to create that navigation variable again, except this time we're going to leave off listen : false because we want it to listen. And now down here in Navigator, we can use some if-then statements to set up navigation to settings and about. And you'll see here we're getting an error because we have const up here, so we'll remove that. And we'll add it right here. Now we'll do the about if statement. So if everything works correctly, we can restart here and we should be able to navigate between the About and Settings pages. So you may notice a couple of things. The first thing you may notice is when I click these buttons, it doesn't change blue like the home page. Also, if you're following along with me, you may have noticed that the back button doesn't work. Let's tackle the back button first. Down here under Pages, we're going to add an On Pop page. So it should work now. If you click on Settings, you can hit the back button, but you'll notice if you hot reload, it still goes to the Settings page. So we can fix that real quick as well. What we'll do is we'll set up a Boolean here called pop status. Then we're going to use an if-then statement to say if pop status equals true, we're going to change the screen to that / or to the home page. Now you may have noticed that I didn't use this navigation variable up here, and the reason is because this variable up here is set to listen, and we don't want to listen on this one. So we're just needing to make sure that we change our screen name variable back to the home page when we pop back. So the last thing we'll do is we'll add return pop status. So what it's going to do is if we pop back, it's going to change that screen name back to the home page. So when you hot reload, the screen name is where it's supposed to be. Let's give it a try. I'll hit settings, I'll hit back, and then I'll hot reload, and everything works the way it's supposed to. So now let's handle the button colors not changing. We're going to go back into bottom nav. Up here at the top, we're going to set up an integer called active button index. And then down below, we're going to initialize it. And then here in the bottom navigation bar, we're going to set up a current index and point it to that active button index. Up here on bottom nav, we'll go ahead and add the const. Now you'll see that About, List, and Settings all show errors. So we're going to go into List, and all we have to do is set bottom nav, and we're going to pass 0. Because remember, the list page is the 0 button. We're going to go into Settings and set that one to 1. And About, and set that one to 2. So now let's say you press Settings. Settings is going to be index 1. So it's going to come into the bottom navigation bar's on tap. It's going to see that you pressed 1. It's going to change the screen name to Settings. It's going to reload the app, which is going to load the settings screen. And then it's going to say, show me the bottom nav and set the active index to 1. So when it loads the bottom nav again, the active button index is set to 1, and that sets the current index, which will turn this to blue. Click on Settings, it's a blue. Click on About, it's a blue. If we go back, Home is blue. So now we're ready to add the list of games to the list page. We're going to start by creating a game model. So up here in Lib, I'm going to create a new folder called Models. And inside there, I'm going to create a new file called the Game. Inside this game file, we're going to create a class called Game. The game is going to have a name that's a string. It's going to have a description that's a string. And then we will need to initialize it. That's all we're going to do in that file. Now we're going to create a game controller. So under controllers, I'm going to create a new file called game. We will import material at the top, and we'll go ahead and import the game model. Again, we're going to create a game controller, and it's going to extend the ChangeNotifier. At the top, we're going to create an integer called game index. And then I'm going to create a function inside this controller called ChangeIndex. So we will call ChangeIndex with our new index, and then we will set that to the game index up here at the top. And then once again, we will notify our listeners. So we're also going to put our game list in here. So our first game is Defender, which is a space shooter by Williams Electronics. And then our second game, we will add is E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which is arguably the best game ever made, which everyone knows it's the best game ever made. So now we need to go back into the main.dart and we need to set up a listenable provider for our game controller. So up here we'll add our game controller. We'll just copy and paste this listenable provider and change navigation to game. Inside the list.dart file, I'm going to import provider and that game controller. At the top of widget build, I'm going to create a variable called game that we'll call the game controller. And this one will listen. Now for the body, we're going to create a list view. We'll do a list view builder. And there we go. We see our game list on the video game list page. So now we need to get the user over to the details page when they tap on one of these game names. So we're going to import the navigation controller up here at the top. Inside the list tile, we're going to create an on tap. So now inside this on tap, we're going to set the game index to the index of the game here. And we're going to change the screen to the details page. So I'm going to top that out real quick and then I'll explain it a little bit further. So once again, you'll notice we didn't use this game variable up here. It's because this one is listening and these we do not want to listen. So now let's go back to main.dart and we need to set up an if statement for details. Now we should be able to click on the game name, but we're not going to see any details yet. So we'll go to the details page here. We're going to import provider at the top. We also need to add the game controller here. Under widget build, we're going to create a game variable that references the game controller. And then right here where it says a video game, I'm going to type game.list game.gameindex name. We'll remove the const here now. So now when we click on Defender, you should see Defender details. Okay, now I'm going to try to walk through what happens. In the game list, each one of these games has an index. Defender would have index 0, ET would have index 1, the next game would have index 2, and so on. So when you click on Defender, it's calling this change index to change the active index to 0. And then it's changing to the details screen. So when you come over here to the details screen, it says, give me the game that's in the game controller, give me the list of games, give me the game index, which is currently 0, and give me that game's name. So when we click on Defender, we get Defender. So we'll go ahead and add a description. I'm going to type in body and then center. And then we'll just do a text of game list game index dot description. And there we go. There's the description. So that's pretty much the tutorial, but I'm going to show you one more thing that shows the flexibility of Navigator 2.0. So back in main.dart, you see these if statements, but there's really not a lot more we can do with this. So down here at the very bottom, I'm going to create a list. We're going to call it get pages. I'll initialize the variable. Now we're going to go ahead and add the list screen to this page list without any conditions. because in order for this back button to work, it has to have a screen to go to. So the list screen always has to load. Now instead of using these if statements, we're going to use a switch case down here. The first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to grab this navigation variable and I'm going to put it down here. And then I'm going to set up the switch case. Now I'm just going to copy this and paste it 3 times. And then I'll change this one to settings and this one to about and this one to details. And then at the very bottom, we need to return this page list. So now we can remove all of this right here and just type in get pages. We're going to have to pass in the context. And then we can remove this navigation call up here. Do a restart and everything should still work correctly. We can go to settings, we can go to about, the back button works. If we go to Defender, we can see the description. Everything is working the way it should be. But you have a lot more flexibility on what you can do with these material pages this way. So we could do a lot more cleanup with this, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of how Navigator 2.0 works. So you may also like this video here, and if you liked this video and would like to be notified when there are more, please consider subscribing. Thanks, and I hope to see you in the next one.